Why are people acting like nuclear weapons don't exist anymore? People don't act like nukes don't exist, they argue according to escalatory logic. Nukes are the endgame, it's like flipping the table, you can do it only once and it hurts yourself as well. So as long as you got something to lose it hurts you to use them. You are right that there can't be a WW2 style moment of Abrams driving through Red Square, but nobody wants that. The bigger question is, would Putin end Russia as we know it because of some French advisors in Ukraine? Would that be logical? Not at all. So nukes are purely reactive weapons, you can't actually really use them except in very desperate scenarios. Russian doctrine even says they can only be used in cases of threats to the integrity of Russia itself, a far cry from what Macron proposed. Also, the Russians have made their own deterrence worse, by invoking the threat of nuking so many times and drawing so many red lines that never happen that countries have become more bold. Nukes only make sense if the result achieved is advantageous, meaning it more than compensates for the obliteration of dozens of Russian cities. Russia losing in Ukraine is not worth those Russian cities, so why would they nuke? This is exactly the problem with nukes. It's not a question of if you push the big red button, it's, will we have the balls to push the big red button before it's too late and we actually lose? No one wants mad, so nuke-armed countries will hold off till the last minute. It's a game of chicken. I can't speak for most people. Social media breeds a special sort of ignorance that can only be confronted on a case-by-case basis. However, this podcast from West Point sheds some light on more official thinking on the subject. People at higher levels of government are taking the issue very seriously. https://mwi.westpoint.edu/mwi-podcast-nuclear-weapons-past-present-and-future. Now, getting to Macron's proposal specifically, his suggestion was for support troops. While likely to anger Putin, troops in this role are very unlikely to promote escalation. Russia would have a hard time attacking France without risking war with the rest of NATO as well. However, a lot of people question whether Macron is seriously considering any such action anyway. It's a difficult line to walk. Do we play at brinkmanship, or accept a world in which the new dictatorships will be able to annex and conquer at will all territories that are not in a nuclear-armed defensive alliance? Russia has asked the question. China is paying close attention to the answer. If Putin wins the US election towards the end of this year, it may be a moot point anyway. You need to provide some source that 1,000 nuclear weapons will end all multicellular life on Earth. Because in all the scientific papers I've read on the climate impact of a moderate nuclear war, India versus Pakistan with 100 weapons each, and a full-scale war, Russia, China, the US with thousands of warheads, nothing mentions that. The casualties are predicted to come mainly from the hypothetical famine caused by soot injected into the stratosphere, which blocks enough sunlight to lower the growing season in the northern hemisphere by so much that agriculture won't be possible for several years. However, this only is predicted to affect the northern hemisphere. The soot can't easily cross the equator, and even this nuclear famine hypothesis is met with some skepticism. It relies on data gathered in WW2 on the smoke released from firebombed cities, while modern cities may have a much lower smoke rate due to a change in building materials. The people killed in the blasts directly would be relatively lower. The radiation from fallout largely dissipates to semi-safe levels within a few days, which is why you only have to stay inside for 3 days. So if agriculture is actually possible in the northern hemisphere due to overestimating the soot release, we might actually have our state survive this. There is no consensus on what the effects would be. But nobody believes it would end all human life, let alone multicellular life. When you read enough propaganda claiming that all of the Russian and Chinese military hardware will fall apart and fail to function correctly, you will think the same of their nukes. It's a dangerous way of thinking, to have your entire strategy rely on the enemy encountering catastrophic mechanical failure. I mean, don't get me wrong, the fact that Ukraine is still alive and kicking in 2024 is a testament to how poorly organized the Russian military is, but it's still better to overestimate the enemy than it is to underestimate the enemy. The reason people don't worry so much about nukes is fairly straightforward. There are two types of nukes, first strike and second strike. All nuclear-armed countries have first-strike weapons. These are the big, dick-measuring bombs. But us, and Russia, and a few other to a much lesser degree, have a well-developed second-strike capability. They are the find out end of the spectrum, the real-world enders. To go to nuclear war with one of these countries is to 100% guarantee your own complete annihilation. Let's say you initiate a nuclear strike against the United States, you manage to completely decapitate the military and government, you manage to wipe out the silos in the Dakotas, and you manage to catch the bombers on the ground. You're still fucked. We have a classified number of boomers, hiding under the ice or lurking in the ocean, each carrying a classified number of long-range nuclear missiles. Each of those subs is carrying enough firepower to casually obliterate mainland Europe, or thereabouts. The age of nukes as a weapon of war is over. Nukes are just tokens to show that a country has reached a certain level of military sophistication. Anyone dumb or crazy enough to use a nuke guarantees the erasure of their own culture. This is direct straight-line path towards a nuclear war. Maybe, but this isn't clear at all. The US and the USSR did directly fight each other in Korea and in Vietnam. The Soviets sent fighter pilots to fight for North Korea and North Vietnam, and yet we didn't trade nuclear strikes. It is generally estimated that the detonation of only 1,000 nukes would effectively end all multicellular life on Earth. This just isn't true at all. There were over 1,000 nuclear test detonations through the Cold War, and yet we're all still here. Nuclear winter is a myth. And even if it does happen, it definitely won't end all multicellular life on Earth. It won't even wipe us out. Macron may have said what he said because of the nukes. One option to stop Russia would be for another nuclear power to step in on Ukraine's behalf. A wall of French soldiers says to Putin, "Stop here unless you are willing to make this a nuclear war." Yeah, it's risky, because Putin could be willing to make it a nuclear war, but that's the same kind of gamesmanship that defined the Cold War. Woo, so many Reddit experts spouting off confidently, when even actual deterrence theory experts tacitly admit they're basically guessing because none of it is falsifiable. Glorious. Expectations met. Imagine writing that you think the president of France does not know nuclear weapons exist or is acting like they do not. Please go on again and cite how smart and well-versed you are in this. If you cannot understand this basic concept on why they are doing this, not that you have to agree, then I truly do not even know where to start. He even explains why. There's no question in here, you're just trying to sound smart and feel superior. Just because people aren't as well educated on history, international politics, military doctrine, and other related fields, doesn't mean they're stupid. It just means they haven't wasted as much time as you have reading about issues they have already been decided. Military and geopolitical history is great. What isn't great is regurgitating a few Wikipedia articles you read to Reddit to try to sound like you're actually saying important, instead of just dissing people who've touched far more grass than you ever have. There are two main issues. One is Russia has been threatening to use nukes for so long that it's a boy that cried wolf situation. Also, Russia knows full well that the moment they use nukes they lose due to the theory of mad. Second, nobody knows how many nukes it takes to wipe out life on Earth. A lot of the estimates used for things like nuclear winter comes from outdated data collected in the 1940s. More modern theories indicate that a nuclear war would certainly destroy a lot of major countries and Western civilization as we know it, but it wouldn't be the end of all life. Also, there is a growing idea that maybe Russia is lying about their nuclear abilities, but even if true, it's still better for countries to err on the side of caution. As for Macron, I think he is making the right call. Countries have been trying to capitulate to Putin for over a year, giving him a chance after chance to back down, but it just emboldens Russia to continue its war. At some point, a strong stance is needed. Just about every scenario in the nuclear Armageddon works of the 80s and 90s had the conflict starting off conventionally, either between East and West Germany, the day after the last broadcast, or somewhere in the Middle East, threads, countdown to Looking Glass. Inevitably, one side or the other would start losing and break out the tactical nukes. The other side would retaliate with their own TAC nukes, and things would escalate from there to a full strategic exchange, aka launch everything you got at the enemy's major population centers. The leaders of the world's nuclear powers have every incentive to keep things from going this far as long as they believe they have everything to lose if it happens. It's not going to be much of a victory when the only reward for the winning side is a longer, more agonizing death through starvation or radiation sickness. There is a small possibility that a crazy person gets to a position of power and is able to command the people needed to launch nuclear weapons, and then actually hits the red suicide button. To me, the development of that situation is almost totally removed from geopolitics and conventional war. So that's why we can discuss all kinds of world events outside of the context of nuclear war.